Hi, welcome to the Mill. This is our second episode of June. In June, we are all about Pride Month, featuring some incredible people doing incredible things. Today, I am so honored and excited to have a very dear friend of mine. We go way back, Chantel Mattiola. Chantel has dedicated the past decade to working in the progressive nonprofit sector, developing strategy and fundraising for gender equity and LGBTQ plus equality. Chantel is currently the Deputy Director of Special Projects at the Human Rights Campaign, the nation's largest LGBTQ plus civil rights organization. Additionally, as if that's not enough, she's a Stein Scholar for Public Interest Law and Ethics at Fordham University Law School as an evening division student. She earned her BA in International Relations and Women, Gender, and Sexuality Studies from Johns Hopkins University and her MA in International Peace and Conflict Resolution from Arcadia University. Chantel currently lives in New York City with her wife and her amazing daughters. Chantel, thank you so much for joining.
Thanks, Rach. I am so happy to be here and for our worlds to cross in this way. And many thanks to your team for inviting me to join and be in conversation today. I'm really looking forward to it.
Of course, it's really important to have conversations, give them a platform, and then to share that with others. And that's really what the Mill is all about. We could definitely talk about marketing and advertising and strategy, but we do that for a living. So we're really excited to have a platform where we get to have real conversations that can hopefully make an impact for someone.
It's so important. If you have the platform, love that you're amplifying it.
Yeah, and who doesn't love to be on video 24/7 instead of an audio podcast? So thanks for being a trooper, Chantel. So I want to talk about HRC, the Human Rights Campaign. You've been there for a long time. What are some things that you're doing and HRC is doing that you're really excited about at the moment?
Yeah, and before I start off, I just want to make sure that I share my pronouns too, because it's really important to me to make sure that other folks feel comfortable in sharing theirs. So my pronouns are she, her, hers. Rach, would you mind sharing yours with me?
Of course. Thank you for asking. My pronouns are also she, her, hers.
Thanks, Rach. Appreciate it. So, okay, this question could take the whole entire podcast, and maybe we do a separate one so that we can just like kiki about this the whole entire time. But HRC's work is so dynamic. We're doing so much that it is often hard to pick one thing. However, I narrowed it down, and I would say the three top things right now that I'm the most excited about that HRC is doing is one, our unapologetic fight in the movement for trans rights. Trans folks are under attack in our country and around the globe. And we're being unapologetic about reaching out to these communities. HRC, as you mentioned earlier, we fight for all folks in the LGBTQ community. So lesbians, gays, bisexual, transgender, and queer folks, and many more folks that make up our community. The second is our impact litigation work. This is really exciting stuff. We launched our impact litigation work back in 2019, and HRC's been doing this work on the ground with our partners in the movement for years, throughout our 40-year history. And I'll share a little bit more about that in a moment if I can. But then the third, and I'd be remiss if I didn't share a little bit more about it, it's because it's the initiative that I helped found, and that's our Women Lead initiative. And this initiative is my baby if I didn't have many other babies. But Women Lead is an ongoing initiative that is focused on engaging and activating equality-minded women and non-binary folks in the fight for LGBTQ equality. So those are my top three things. I'm happy to dive into all of them a little bit more, but you tell me what time we have, Rach.
Well, I would talk to you for hours, Chantel. So I'm really interested in the Women Lead. Mill and Co. actually launched an initiative called Table Talk. And it is a quarterly networking series to promote, empower, invigorate, and inspire women in business and female identifying founders in New Hampshire.
Hmm.
New Hampshire is not an incredibly diverse state. There aren't a ton of communities and support for the LGBTQ plus community or for women. Um, and that needs to change. And so I'm really excited. I'm also very new. We just did this in March was our first event. We're planning another one in August. And so I'm still trying to shape what we need to be and how we can be as supportive and inclusive as we can. So I'd love for you to dive into the work that you're doing with Women Lead.
Sure, I'm happy to do so. And also, I find this really interesting because New Hampshire, I know, has a lot of women leadership in a variety of capacities. And we
Yeah.
see this across the country, right? We're seeing women in as CEOs, as school principals, in the news anchors. We're everywhere. I mean, we are doing phenomenal work, and sometimes it's about creating a brand behind the work that is already happening. And that's something that HRC has done with Women Lead. We have a strong history of women leaders who've helped build the organization that we are today. As I mentioned, we're 40 years in our work. We have our location is in Washington, D.C. However, we have hundreds of volunteers and staff across the country. We're a 3 million member base. And I say that because we're everywhere. And women and non-binary folks are doing this work day in and day out. And so the Women Lead initiative isn't, we're not doing anything that we haven't already done in our 40-year history. Women Lead is a collective of HRC women, non binary folks, and gender expansive folks who are ready to say, hey, we're willing to show up and show
Mhm.
out and bring our folks along with us. And we have clear goals and benchmarking behind our efforts so that we can see this is how much we accomplished in this year, and this is what we're going to accomplish in future years. We are getting women to organize, we're getting women to vote, we're getting women to advocate and lead. And when we started Women Lead or branded Women Lead, it was in advance of the 2018 midterms. And this was strategic to some extent because we saw a record number of women running for office
Mm.
and a record number of LGBTQ women running for office. And and so when we launched this, we immediately saw an impact of raising money for these candidates, and also the folks that were running the candidates were women too. And we have continued to see the success through our efforts from that 2018 midterms until present day. And we're doing so much more. And I'm curious, Rach, is what type of events are coming up for you?
With what we're hosting for Table Talk.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I get to make those decisions, which is fun. And so, for me, there's a couple layers into it. The first was I'm a female, I'm a woman CEO, right? I belong to a lot of women's groups. Just last night, I was at an equity and justice event for New Hampshire school districts. I'm very active in the community, but I don't think that there's enough support, collaboration, and collectivity within women in those power positions. And so that's really what drove the initiative of Table Talk to say, let's get together, let's share our voices. And looking ahead to the August event, we will be inviting men to that group with the same mission. You need to
Mhm.
show up. You need to support us. We did the first one together because it was a launch. And so the first one was on International Women's Day, which was in March 8th. I rented a woman owned commercial kitchen space. I found a woman and sister owned pasta sauce company named Jar Good. They donated the sauce, which is amazing. And we had about 30 women show up, and I taught them how to make homemade pasta because, of course. Um,
You want to show
and
up
we
for that.
ate. And so they got to get their hands dirty and do something that felt really exciting and meaningful and not just go, slap around as many business cards as you can and compete with everyone else in the room.
Mm,
Which really, to me, feels like a very masculine way of doing business. I'd rather make connections, networks, trust, relationship, and then support each other. So for this first event, I paired people together based on their industry, um, the company that they worked for, and if I knew anything about what they might be looking for. So we could have really meaningful connections, but that it didn't feel forced.
mm,
Likewise, once we went down to sit and eat, I had changed up the order of the team so that you got to meet someone new, and give everyone a homework assignment that you had to have at least two virtual coffees with people that you met at the event. It went incredibly well. I got so many emails from people saying, I can't tell you what a breath of fresh air that felt. I felt really safe. I felt heard. I didn't feel pressured. I felt like I could really be myself. And Chantel, to be honest, those are not things I thought would come out of Table Talk. I had a lot of ambitions, right, for to feel community and a sense of belonging and trust. But for people to feel safe, I mean, that was a huge insight for me. So we're planning another one in August. This one's going to be a hopefully a spirits tasting and food pairing. So you'll get to learn about whiskey, gin, and vodka, the making process behind it, be educated about something cool, get to taste delicious food with it, and then go home with a recipe card to make a cocktail with each of those three spirits. And the spirits company is a female Black and family owned business, which is incredibly rare in the spirits world, and they're an awesome client of ours. So I don't really know what the future holds for Table Talk, but my hope is that it can continue to grow and people in New Hampshire start to feel that sense of community and belonging.
You're building something really, truly phenomenal, and sign me up for that next one, please.
I'll add you to our list.
You take New York residents.
Anybody. So, Chantel, I want to shift gears just slightly. We're talking about community, belonging. There's a lot going on in the world right now, and I'm curious, how do you feel about the way that the LGBTQ plus community is being represented in media today?
Yeah. I mean, what media are you watching? Um, right?
Fair
What
question.
media are you consuming? It's, I mean, the LGBTQ community is centered in politically left and politically right media all the time. In political left media in the US, LGBTQ folks are everywhere and we're celebrated, for the most part. And we're the most visible we've ever been in history. And that is this pride that is something to celebrate. And we need to find joy. Like the news is garbage and folks are under attack and so these
Yes.
are things that we celebrate. We celebrate our visibility and our happiness, our families, our young folks that are coming up in the community. And like I said earlier, we are everywhere. We are the leaders you see leading in every field. And we're also the folks doing the work that we're your neighbors. And a lot of that is focused in the media these days. And this is why coming out is so important of course, when it's safe to do so, because visibility matters. Visibility tells closeted kids who are consuming this media that it's okay to be your authentic self, that they're not alone. And so if you're watching one area of media that is telling young people and telling society that LGBTQ folks are just like your children, they're just like your neighbors, they're your colleagues. We're just like y'all. We make mistakes too. We're normal people, but we're also leading and doing incredible stuff.
Mhm.
Now, unfortunately, in conservative media, LGBTQ voices are often silenced, slandered, bullied, but and we see that everywhere. And I really choose joy in this conversation today. And one thing I know for sure is that bullies never win. They can amplify all they want, they can spread lies about our community, but there's good news because we outnumber them. And there's statistics that show that. I don't have them in front of me, but there are stats that show that more people in the US are being more accepting of the LGBTQ community
Yeah.
and are more accepting of LGBTQ marriage, same gender marriage. And so the good always outweighs the hate in that sense. But that doesn't stop from needing to make change and continuing to fight back against some of this onslaught of bad media that we're getting. And again, we're seeing that a lot with the trans community. And our message for LGBTQ plus folks is that our message will amplify through the small towns, and especially at HRC, this is our mission, is that our message will amplify through the small towns, through the big cities, and echo around the country because we know we have folks in all these places. There are
Mhm.
LGBTQ folks everywhere. And we all know the famous sayings that the arc of history bends towards justice. And so I'm hopeful this Pride, but I also know the work that we have ahead of us in changing those media narratives. I mean, you're doing it today by inviting me here to chat about it, and so I thank you. And hopefully, some of your listeners uh, tuning in to your podcast are getting this message and maybe can have a few takeaways from listening in.
Did you watch the show Schitt's Creek?
Uh, Of course,
Repeatedly.
of
So
course.
there's also a documentary that came out. I've watched that multiple times and cried every single time. And I love the way that Dan Levy talks about his character, David. Um, they never had a coming out. They never had a, oh my God, you're gay. They never, it wasn't a focus. He was just their son.
Mm,
And it was the first time I had heard it so poetically put in that documentary. If you haven't seen it, please go find it for anyone watching. Um, and it struck me in such a way of like, it is normal. It is who
mhm,
you are. It doesn't need to be this big grandstand gesture presentation moment. Which what I know from queer folks in my family and my friends that it is very challenging in some instances to come out. And so that's unrealistic in many instances because it's not always that way. And so I think that show, that documentary, reading through that, seeing I don't remember the name of some Facebook group of moms sent them a bunch of stories about how their show impacted their children.
mhm.
Um, it's that's the way that it should be. And I think and I feel and I hope that that's the way of the world that we're going to continue to move in. There's certainly a lot of work to be done.
I have seen that documentary, and even being in this work day in and day out, I bawled my eyes out. There's something about a parent telling a LGBTQ person, "You're okay. You're
Yeah.
loved." It's so special, but you're absolutely right. I was waiting for in that show a moment for to hear the sad story, to
Mhm.
hear the bullied kid, but they never did. Love Schitt's Creek.
Me too. God is the best. Um, so, I think that there are a lot of well-intended, well-meaning people, businesses, brands. I do believe that. I do believe that, I like to think that people are more good than they are bad. Most people, some people.
Mm,
Um, but there are some brands that have come under fire over the last couple of years where they decide for the month of June and only for the month of June to discount products or conversely to mark up products splattered in rainbows and phrases, trying to target folks in the LGBTQ plus community. And then they disappear for the next 11 months. I'm sure I already know your opinion, but I'm really curious to hear your thoughts about those brands when they do that to support the community when actually it is kind of capitalism and trying to make money.
yeah, yes, I'm sure you know what my response will be, but however, I think this question is really important now. If anyone's paying attention to the news, you see what's happening to Target, to Anheuser-Busch, to it was happening to Disney, it's continuing to happening to Disney. And but I think this is so important to talk about because a lot of people in the queer movement are like, ugh, pride, it's so corporate now. And, to some extent, I feel those sentiments, but gosh, look how far we've come. Like, these people want to be celebrating with us now.
Hmm.
Where's the action? There has to be the visibility plus the action.
Yeah.
We're seeing extremist anti-LGBTQ plus rhetoric and attacks on our community and on businesses that stand by these values of diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Hmm.
And it's still going on now. Target is pulling items off the shelf because they were threatened by conservative extremists to pull down Pride merchandise. A couple weeks ago, as I mentioned earlier, Anheuser-Busch, makers of some of the beer you probably drank in college, and but really popular brands refuse to stand behind values it claims to espouse.
Hmm.
after coming under fire against these same extremists. And I think the campaign that Anheuser-Busch ran, more specifically, if your listeners aren't familiar, was in collaboration with a trans influencer, Dylan Mulvaney. And it was impactful, but in very different and isolating ways. And they're backpedaling now. Target's backpedaling. But corporate allies, like all of us, don't always get it right. And I think that's really important here. I pause because what I want to say is we have to cancel culture. Like people should be given the opportunity to make up for their wrongs and listen to where they went wrong, listen to their employees, listen to their sponsors and say, you know what, actually, this is I need to respond and move forward in the right way.
Mm-hmm.
And because we see it in the other lane, businesses that are silent and retreating are sending a really clear message to the people who work for them. Okay, maybe this isn't a safe place for me to work if you're taking a Live Laugh Lesbians t-shirt off of the Target shelves, which by the
Sure.
way, we should talk about in another podcast because that is hilarious.
A lot of
Um,
thought.
but but the businesses that are standing up are sending a message saying like employees, shareholders, customers, equality is not up for debate. And it really is so simple. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so I think the wave of rainbow themed products and merchandise with a company logo just tagged right on there is important. But it also comes with the company saying, we're going to coincide this with action, with policies, with a loud voice that's not just saying we support the LGBT community, but this is exactly how we're doing it. And we
Yeah.
have a really great resource at the Human Rights Campaign. It's called the Corporate Equality Index.
Mm.
And this is our primary driving force for LGBTQ plus equality and a great resource to check out for anyone listening and wanting to know if they're supporting companies that support LGBTQ plus equality. And so the CEI, Corporate Equality Index, is the national benchmarking tool. We actually rate these companies and they sign up for it. So it's not like we're holding their feet to the fire for to get rated, but companies who receive 100% get to use the HRC logo on their
Mm.
websites, in their branding, in their HR outreach, saying that they are a best place to work for LGBTQ equality. And so this is a great avenue for folks this pride when you're taking a look at the companies who are putting whitewashing with rainbow everywhere to seeing if they have the actions behind their rainbows. So let me
Yeah.
be clear. Like HRC is calling out the people who aren't doing this and are just using our logo and using the rainbow to to get some money through Pride Month. But I really encourage folks to use the rainbow flag, but back it up with action.
I couldn't agree more. As a part of the work that we do for brand strategy, DEI is one of the elements of our what we call a 360 channel plan.
Hmm.
So, often clients will say, "Oh, I have that picture of the same sex couple on our website. We did it." And I'm like, I'm so yes, that is 1/100th of what you should be doing. But I would never make them feel bad about it because you're right, Chantel. That for some is an absolute hard line. No, we will never feature a same sex or a person of color, God forbid, on our website. Never. So those moments we try to celebrate and then empower and encourage them of like, okay, let's look at what vendors do you work with?
Hmm.
What other clients do you have? What charities are you involved with? What other action are you taking? And how is that a part of your greater strategic plan as a business? Not just, oh yeah, we should probably do that because people are looking at us and we don't want to be judged as, homophobic or any. So it is really important. And I've been very fortunate that the clients that we've worked with are very open, very progressive. They want to listen, they want to learn. They're
Hmm.
not afraid to admit that they don't know everything. Um, and that gives me, a lot of hope for our future and future companies. And, you know, I've also experienced, you know, white, straight female, right? Haven't had a lot of barriers in my life, and I'm not ashamed to admit that. I've had it pretty easy. I know that some people haven't. And I've also witnessed this in the workplace, but I want to know, what are your thoughts on entrepreneurs, founders, um, people in the workforce who feel the need to hide their identity, their true identity, in order to survive in the workplace?
Hmm. Rach, this is um I have seen and talked with people across the country around coming out before, way before I was with the Human Rights Campaign. And but to this day, in fact, there was two stories that come to mind that I talked with two folks over the weekend. I was in Washington, D.C. for a work event, and I had the opportunity to meet with lots of our supporters and lots of the people that are across the country doing the good work. And I was talking to a trans kiddo last week, and they told me the safest place that they felt they could come out was in a gaming room, like virtual reality. Um, and there is something comforting about that, to know there are virtual spaces where LGBTQ youth are finding community and feeling safe to share who they really are. But as the adults, this tells me we gotta do better, right? And another kiddo recently told me that they were afraid of using their pronouns in public out of fear that their family would find out, and be outed, or maybe their school district. And I know you mentioned the workforce specifically and businesses and entrepreneurs, but I think it's important to recognize where the shame first starts. And these are in our adolescent years, and where we're realizing that there aren't family members or folks in our community who are giving us the, hey, heads up that, you're actually fine to be who you are. And so we see these young people grow into these entrepreneurs, into these companies that are not a safe place to come out, or they don't feel like they can come out. So there is a direct
Mhm.
tie to the two. And at the end of the day, coming out is the hardest decision that some people will make in their life. And safety is the number one priority in someone's coming out decision. And unfortunately, we still live in a world where that is the case. Our community experiences hate, crimes, discrimination, violence on a daily basis. Like, I don't think if you, I hope this is ringing true to your listeners. And to me, it's not a political point. It's like trans people are facing an epidemic of violence, of crimes, of discrimination and violence. Like, there's something's not right there. People are, of course, they're afraid to come out because they're afraid of their safety of their body and their
Right.
and rejection. I mean, these are things that we learn as young kids. We want to feel safe. We want to feel loved. So, yes, I have personally witnessed this, and this is why I continue to stay in the work with the Human Rights Campaign, because we are changing hearts and minds, we are changing policies, and giving folks the opportunity to come out and say, hey, you got a community waiting for you who is ready to see you succeed and thrive as your true authentic self. Yeah, gosh.
Yeah. That work is so important. And I think what really keeps me up at night is when you hear stories of young folks taking their own lives, out of as an only option out.
Mhm.
And I have chills talking about it because you know, I can't imagine the feeling. I have a hard time wrapping my brain around it. And I think when I really think about the people that are, um, mostly, discriminating against trans, queer people in the LGBTQ plus community, I think it's a fear and a misunderstanding. Um, and so I find myself wondering, how can I help? How do I help talk to people and use my voice of, to communicate? Let's talk about it. Let me understand. Let me try to understand where you're coming from, and let's try to reposition maybe how that can impact someone else. And it's just that this is a topic we could talk about for a really long time, but it's just something that is really disheartening to me because I know there's a lot of great work happening, and then I read something like that and I'm immediately like, oh my God, I like this
Hmm.
has to end. It has to be better. We have to do better.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point, Rach, because we even see people within the LGBTQ plus community who aren't understanding why we're putting so much effort towards protecting trans folks. And this is where we got to course correct here because it wasn't too long ago in the 1980s where we're in the HIV/AIDS pandemic, epidemic. And so we had our brothers sick and dying in the 80s, and people left what they were doing and went to the aid of their community members. And we're in the same exact boat right now. We're in an epidemic of violence against our trans siblings, and we are saying we're not stopping our work to support all LGBTQ folks, but we are realizing that hey, if the house is burning, we got to put out the fire and really put our efforts into protecting our people. And yeah, like you said, right, we could talk about this forever, and we will, because we got to keep talking about it and having these important conversations.
And I think the difference too, and I've seen this with a lot of the DEI work we've been doing recently, the house is burning. Whoever's in the house needs to come out. We need to get them out of the house. Like it's
Mhm.
not, well, the fire will put out, but we're going to leave some of you behind and then we'll just take these ones because it's just easier or it's what we're more familiar. You have to have a really inclusive mindset when it comes to justice and equity for all. And
Mhm.
I think that's a good segue, Chantel, into what you're now pursuing, which is just as if you couldn't be more impressive. You're now getting your law degree at Fordham. I would love for you to share what was one of or all of the motivating factors that pushed you into pursuing your law degree.
Well, I hope if you leave today, you can understand my passion for this work. And there was a moment a couple years ago. It was shortly after my first child was born where I decided I am so. Will you blank this out? Because I really want to use the F word, but I am so fed up.
Do it.
Like I am so fed up, and I have my passion to prove what is just and right has taken many forms throughout the years. And I think people need to know you can be an activist no matter what. You don't have to be getting um, locked up on the Supreme Court steps to be an activist. You don't need to throw red paint on a wall or a person to be an activist. You can show up in many different ways and claim that title for yourself because we need people to be doing that. And so I say that because I've shown up in advocacy in different ways. I've practiced conflict resolution. I am a fundraiser. I've marched, I've protested, and I decided to come out. And gosh, thank goodness I did. I it's living my authentic life is one of the most profound ways to advocate. And but I decided after my first kid was born that I needed to show up in a different way. I needed a tool set um, and a skill set to do something more. And because I saw the world wasn't what it should be or what I imagined it should be, not for me, not for my family, not for trans youth, not for any LGBTQ plus kids. So, like all of us, I decided to take the LSAT in the middle of the pandemic with a newborn.
Not like all of us. I just want that to be clear. I did not take the LSAT in the middle of the pandemic. Okay. Just so we're clear.
Yeah, and I just I knew I needed and could do more. I have great fortune with, a great partner and a great village of friends where I could apply to law school. And so last fall, I started law school in New York City with two kiddos under three, and I just finished my first year in law school. And my wife and I are expecting our third kiddo this summer. Oh my. But anyway, this is the Rach, this is like wild, right? We're doing so much because we see the need to do it. And I get, there's this saying, and I think you'd appreciate it, that it makes me laugh a little bit. But I saw it the other day and it says, hands are full, hearts are fuller. Now,
Mm,
bear with me. I
hmm
feel like this is something that a suburban mom would put up in her house or on
Yeah,
a
over
like
the hood of the
keychain,
oven
right? Or like on a mug. And
with
I
a
have a
nice
strict,
teak. Oh, yeah.
yes, yeah. Hands are full, hearts are fuller. But but I think this is my motivation for a lot of the work that I'm doing. I My vision is clear at this point, and I have my eye set towards all good stuff. And I know gaining this tool set will be an investment in not only me and my family's future, but in my community's future. And it feels there has never been, maybe a few days, but never been a day that I've regretted this decision to go to law school and get this skill set.
That level of clarity that you talked about is something that not everyone has. And I've thought about it because I have that level of clarity. And I think, at least in my experience, I get clarity from perspective. I have perspective from things I've gone through. As you know, my dad died almost 12 years ago from cancer, and he was 54. And then my aunt died at, oh, she was in her early 60s 2 years ago from ovarian cancer, very young. And I look at the two of them, and they kind of knew what they wanted out of life, but they were doing things that they felt they needed to do because it was kind of part of their timeline. And it wasn't until the very, very bitter end that they had these moments of clarity of, well, boy, I wish I lived more. I wish I traveled more. I wish I experienced more. And so I am unfortunate to have the perspective of life cut short. But what that's done for me is makes me want to go to Italy every
Mhm.
effing year for the rest of my life. And you know what? I will go every year, except the pandemic. As long as I can afford to and I'm healthy and my partner's healthy, like that's what we're gonna do. I'm gonna go out in the sunshine every single day. I'm gonna use my voice for good. I'm gonna go to events and show up for important conversations because I want to, and it's the right thing to do. And I'm in a position where I am privileged, and I know that I'm privileged. But rather than just hiding behind my privilege, I need to use that to help those who aren't as privileged. So I think that moment of clarity is something that I hope everyone keeps working towards finding that true self-awareness and purpose in life.
That's exactly right. I'm so proud of the fact that because not everyone has that ability to redirect and use really tough times to to get that clarity. And you've done such a phenomenal job, Rach, in building your amazing team at the mill. So proud of you.
Well, I'm proud of you too. And I'd love to wrap this up with kind of a personal question, if that's okay.
Sure.
You know, I love that you talk about speaking of joy and living in joy. And I want to end this conversation with, what kind of future do you hope to see for your kids in terms of our society and culture, acceptance, and for them as they continue to grow older?
Yeah. Oh gosh, everything, all of the good things. I Well, first off, did you know that youth are, I mean, we know, when I say the youth, I feel like I channel into like a my old soul phase, but young people know young people know what's going on. And I feel like when we were their age, a lot of people were saying, they're our future leaders. But no, like they're leaders now. And I'm not saying my youngest, who's under 4 years old, is like a leader, except to lead me in all of the ways to get snacks. And but but I say this because I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful for their generation. I mean Gen Z, their leadership already to protect our earth is number one. And
Mhm.
I think that that's the first thing I'd say. We need a healthy earth. And I'm not the expert to talk on that, but we need to protect this beautiful place where we live. And because what is a place to live if we don't have home? But you're seeing a lot of our younger generations leading the efforts there, and we just need to follow them in that sense. And then I think the other thing, which I'm not going to end on this because it doesn't feel as hopeful, but I think it's important to note is that we need to ban assault weapons. And now don't
And
cut
not
me off
drag
here
queen.
because I feel like we were about a 1 year mark at the massacre at Uvalde, Texas.
Yeah.
We know gun violence is preventable. Uh, responsible gun ownership is possible, and we see it through many of our neighbors and community members. Um, and so I hope that there's an increase in public safety measures that can protect people from gun violence. I mean, we need to protect our kids when they go to school, the most innocent thing that they're doing. Um, we need to protect our families and our communities. And there's two organizations that I highly recommend your listeners check out if they're not familiar with them already, but it's Moms Demand Action and Everytown for Gun Safety. They're doing incredible
Mhm.
work in this area to keep our community safer. And so my hope is that our future society is just protecting us a little bit better. And it's we just need some changes. Um, but on a more hopeful note, I think the really great thing is that we're just the ones that we've been waiting for, right? Like we have
Mhm.
really smart, passionate, dedicated people in our society right now, and we need to give them the chance to lead and add their voices to the work. And so I'm really hopeful there. There's a there's a some words from a poet that I really admire, and Danielle Joby, and she says, "You are a match for your mountain." And I think that's really important, even on the hardest days in this work, to remind ourselves that you are a match for your mountain, and our society will be better for it. And my kiddos' society in the future will be better for it.
I have so many thoughts. First of all, and we'll do another podcast about this because it is important. The fact that we're banning books over assault rifles right now is we're gonna need some wine, some tequila, and about 2 hours because I'm fired the F up. So thank you
Count
for
me
bringing
in.
that up. That's incredibly important. Let's ban drag queens before we ban assault rifles because they're dangerous to children. I want to add, Chantel, to wrap this up. I think that our generation, you and I, should be really proud of ourselves because we are raising that new generation of young, incredible little leaders. And that's what I'm really hopeful for. That someday, if I'm lucky enough to have a family of my own, that they're going to know what's right and what's wrong. They're going to know who they are. They're going to know how to stand up for themselves. They're going to know how to stand up for others. So, I hope anyone watching, if you have the privilege, the fortune, and the burden and responsibility of raising a younger little kid, take that seriously. And more than just, learning right from wrong, but learning how to be a real, true, authentic, contributing member of society.
Thank you so much, Rach.
Period.
This
Thank
was
you. This was incredible to have you on. And God, I would love to talk to you every single month. So next month, same time, same place.
getting
Thank
assault
you,
weapons
Chantel.
next month. Sorry, go
There's a
ahead.
lot that we need to talk about. No, it's okay. I just thank you, everyone. This is really important. If you have any questions for myself or Chantel, please connect with us on LinkedIn. Please reach out. We are both people that want to talk, that want to hear your opinion, your perspective, that want to support you and encourage you. And thank you, as always, for tuning in to The Mill. We are very excited for some awesome podcast features next month. Stay tuned. Come back soon.
Happy Pride Month.
Happy Pride!